Tagore once said, and I quote, "Reach high, for stars lie deep within you. Dream deep, for every dream precedes the goal." Good morning, and a very happy Rabindra Jayanti to one and all. Today was the day India's foremost poet was born. Rabindranath Tagore was an Indian polymath, a poet, a writer, a playwright, a composer, a philosopher, a social reformer, and a painter. He reshaped Bengali literature and music, as well as Indian art, with contextual modernism in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. He is Asia's first Nobel laureate who won the prize for his works in the book Gitanjali, translated into English by the poet W.B. Yeats. His verse, short stories, and novels were acclaimed for their lyricism, colloquialism, naturalism, and unnatural contemplation. His compositions were chosen by two nations as national anthems, India's Jana Gana Mana and Bangladesh's Amar Sonar Bangla. The Sri Lankan national anthem was also inspired by his work. His legacy is carried out through the many forms of art, music, and literature we see around us today. Despite all the trying times we are going through, dance and music never fails to keep us happy, alive, and connected to ourselves. On that note, to start the program, we have students of classes 9 to 12th presenting a dance recital and a musical rendition of Where the Mind is Without Fear. Thank you to our splendid singers and dancers for putting forth such a beautiful recital. Dance and music truly allows the individual to express oneself freely and fully. Such was the ethos followed by Tagore in his unique and contemporary form of schooling established at Shantiniketan. Tagore despised rote learning. In the parrot's training, a bird is caged and force-fed textbook pages to death. He sought to make Shantiniketan the connecting thread between India and the world. The school, which he named Vishwabharati, had its foundation stone laid on 24 December 1918 and was inaugurated precisely 3 years later. Tagore employed a brahmachari system. Gurus gave pupils personal guidance, emotional, intellectual, and spiritual. Teaching was often done under trees. He staffed the school, contributed his Nobel Prize monies, and his duties as a steward mentor at Shanti Niketan kept him busy. In the mornings, he taught classes, afternoons and evenings, he wrote the students' textbooks. He fundraised widely for the school in Europe and the United States between 1919 to 1921. Now, let us take a look at Tagore Shanti Niketan and learn a bit more about Gurudev's life and legacy. Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore, as an educator and as an artist. When the young Rabindranath Tagore was sent to school in 19th century Kolkata, his well-to-do family selected the best British-run schools there. However, the young child was deeply unhappy at the mindless rote learning and the harsh discipline in these schools. Thus, as an adult, he was deeply interested in education and spent much of his time, energy, and almost all of his money on the entirely unique school he created at Shanti Niketan. According to him, the primary objective of education was to enable the child's personality to grow in a natural environment, to freely express himself or herself, and find the balance between one's inner life and the world outside.
Gurudev insisted that education should be imparted in natural surroundings while giving children freedom of expression. He said, "Children have their active subconscious mind, which, like a tree, has the power to gather its food from the surrounding atmosphere." Even today, classes are often held in the shade of the magnificent old trees in the campus. Every evening, every student is encouraged to play games and enhance his or her physical fitness.
According to him, education means enabling the mind to find out that ultimate truth which emancipates us from the bondage of caste. It is a process of enlightenment. It is divine wealth. It helps us in the realization of truth. The aim of education, he felt, is to bring about perfection of man by dispelling ignorance and ushering in the light of knowledge. It should enable us to lead a complete life: economic, intellectual, aesthetic, social, and spiritual. The main objective of his school, Vishwa Bharati at Shanti Niketan, was to cultivate a love for nature, to impart knowledge and wisdom in one's native language, provide freedom of mind, heart, and will, an appreciation of art, music, dance, theatre, etc., and to eventually enrich the Indian culture.
Gurudev wrote, "In education, the inspiring atmosphere of creative activity is most important." Tagore also said, "We should know that the great task of our institution is to provide for the education of the mind and all senses through various activities. Art, music, dance, theatre, and all other art forms were an integral part of every student's life in Vishwa Bharati." He invited the best of artists to live there and teach there. He himself created and directed many of the wonderful dance dramas there.
Tagore himself did not believe in any one religion, but what he called the religion of man. He was deeply spiritual by nature, and referring to religion, he likens an educational institution to a wide meeting place where people of all religions may gather together and forget their differences. In his Shanti Niketan, there is no moral or religious education as a separate curriculum. Tagore believed that this cannot be taught as part of any school syllabus, but the entire curriculum was so devised that students could imbibe values naturally.
Tagore believed that one of the main aims of education is to prepare the individual for the service of the nation while creating sensitive, ethical, and enlightened citizens. He set up a center called Sri Niketan to empower the local villagers to learn handicrafts like leatherwork, batik work, weaving, and to revive the dying art of Katha embroidery. Festivals of all kinds were celebrated at Shanti Niketan, some of which he introduced. For instance, Brickhoropon, a tree planting event where students presented an entire program showing all the elements of the natural world, a small instance of Tagore's far-seeing nature. Holokorshon, where the land is tilled, is another festival encouraging students to appreciate the effort of the farmers.
Gurudev Rabindranath was one of the first Indians to travel to China with a deep appreciation of China's ancient wisdom and culture. He set up an entire department at Vishwabharati for Chinese studies, which he called Chin Bhavan. He invited eminent Chinese scholars like Tan Yun Shan, who became an integral part of Shantiniketan society, fondly known as Tan Sahib. Later, an influential Chinese painter and teacher, Zhu Behang, came to Shantiniketan as the first Chinese visiting professor of Kala Bhavan, the art school at Vishwabharati, which had been eager to get a broad view of Chinese art. Even now, Vishwabharati is frequently host to Chinese scholars and students.
Tagore's system of education focuses on the development of the entire personality: intellectual, spiritual, physical, and emotional. He was a promoter of scientific research, but totally against the borrowed knowledge of the West. Many eminent scholars, writers, thinkers, artists, filmmakers, singers, and even economists are all products of Shantiniketan's liberal environment.
He knew that a balanced personality can be achieved only when there is an integrated development of all the faculties, and the main task of education is the formation of such a personality. It is indeed heartening to see that today's educational system in India incorporates almost all the ideas which were first propagated by Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore. Art integration and emphasis on the overall holistic growth of the child's personality, catering to multiple intelligences, a shift from rote learning to learning to think for himself or herself, an appreciation of India's rich multicultural heritage. All these are ideas that Tagore put forward almost 100 years ago.
Let us now look at Tagore as an artist. Relatively late in life, at the age of 67, after having explored many other mediums of his inexhaustible creativity, Tagore picked up a paintbrush and began experimenting with color and form. His art is today lauded across the globe and much appreciated by collectors. He had said, "We who have traded in lyrics should know that these will not find acceptance at another time. This is inevitable. So, I often think that only painting has a deathless quality." And he spoke of his foray into art as thus: "Now, in the evening of my life, my mind is filled with forms and colors." Tagore also often described his art as Shesh Boisher Priya, which means a love affair in the evening of life.
So prolific a painter was Tagore that he held 9 exhibitions in major cities in Europe and also in Boston and New York between May and December 1930. Most of Tagore's paintings are stark images of man and nature. They are not bound by the typical rules of any school of painting, but are instead expressions of freedom. Many of the maestro's works are doodles that resemble birds, faces, and monsters. Crossed out lines and words would take unplanned and accidental shapes, intuitively linked, usually budding from the subconscious. Most of them represented animals, but seldom the ones we know in reality. More often, his doodles represented what he described as a probable animal.
Most of the women he painted are shown covering their hands and bodies under folds of their flowing veils or saris, signifying the closeted existence of the Indian women of his time. Their eyes suggest sadness, and the dark shadows behind their faces suggest their inability to express themselves. Landscapes, constitute a major theme of his artistic vision. In the beauty and rhythm of lines show his exploration of how they could be used for expressing myriad moods and mystery of nature. Some of his paintings were inspired by the lush green environment of Shantiniketan. An absence of human figures in his landscape gives them a mysterious look.
Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore was a multifaceted genius who celebrated life in all its myriad aspects. A towering personality who left us with an inspiring and truly amazing legacy. Thank you to all the students for putting forward this video. I truly felt that I was transported to Shantiniketan and was able to experience the scenic beauty and the richly diverse atmosphere of the place. And I'm sure all of you felt the same too. Tagore truly defined the Indian contemporary of the 19th century, and his legacy continues on till date. He challenged tradition by formulating a new system of education. He redefined Bengali culture and deeply impacted the global scene as well. His legacy lives on in all of us, as Tagoreans and as global citizens, to be celebrated by all in the times to come. On that note, a very happy Rabindra Jayanti to all of you. Thank you.